Okay, so first up, we have Landon Heflin. He's going to provide and facilitate a discussion on the Citizens Advisory Committee. So I'm going to pitch it to you, Landon.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pablo. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So will remember that when we had the workshop in July, we did our annual construction project update. And at the very end of that, we kind of left it off with, and oh, by the way, we have a cycle that we follow throughout the school district, throughout the school year, it never stops, where we assess our existing facilities for their aging and evolving conditions. We assess the growth, and growth is for sure a theme in town, and the need for future facilities. We studied the demographic information, and we got to see the full presentation from Bob Templeton at the meeting in July. And we also review our financial data, and we got a little bit of an update last time from Jennifer Hanna on all of that. And if you'll recall, we said every once in a while that information begins to bubble up and produce a time for discussion for you all around convening a Citizens Advisory Committee. So back this month to talk a little bit more about the time you've had to process on that prompt from last workshop. Okay? So ultimately, we also have on the agenda a facilities assessment update, and it's really brief. We just wanted you to know where we were with that, because as you will recall, the facilities assessment looks at the aging and evolving conditions of our existing facilities as well. And so it's a statutory or regulatory thing that we do, we're required to do, just so happens to correspond with this topic and could be a very useful report in helping to make decisions. So where that is in May, the awarded company, Park Hill Mocha, met with all campus principals. In June, they completed 17 site assessments. In July, they completed another 12 site assessments. And now here we are in August. They're working on the analysis of that information with the intention in September of delivering a report for you all to review on the condition of the facilities. And then in October, that final presentation and report will come to you all. Okay, so there's a timeline of that work as it's happening. So let's take it back over to then our conversation about the Citizens Advisory Committee. I want to spend just the next few minutes, just not everybody in the room has had the I'll say privilege, honor, whatever it is, has put in the sweat equity of doing this before. So just to give you a little bit of a background, and this information is from past Citizens Advisory Committee work. So language that you'll see, such as parameters and charges, is from previous bonds, but it's still relevant to our conversation here today. So the purpose of the advisory committee is, as stated, to study the facilities, the enrollment projections, financial information, and create and maintain learning environments that are aligned to our vision, mission, and goals. And then ultimately, to provide this board with a recommendation of, that could lead to you calling for a bond, right? It's important to note that a Citizens Advisory Committee is not a required component to calling for a bond. We have, in Georgetown, historically done one with each bond. We believe it to be really important. It creates a degree of transparency for our community and gives them an opportunity to engage with the school district and not only hear the important work that we know is pressing, but to ask questions and get clarification as well. We know from the last bond, I always like to use the example that we worked and worked and worked on the priorities that we knew were important to the school district, and still that committee recognized one that was being overlooked, which was a need for our ag barns at our high schools. And it was through that committee process that work was brought back into attention, added into Proposition A and passed, and we have those buildings in construction right now. So that highlights how important that this action committee can be, advisory committee can be. You have in front of you a handout that says draft really big on it. Too many words and too much text to go over in slides. I wanted to call a few of those out to you just as a kind of a place setter for if you're considering, or if you're kind of new to the CAC process. So the CAC considers the district's current and future facilities needs, as we said. The CAC also represents the school district's community and reflects the community values. So you'll see the CAC is generally a really large committee, so that it can be as representative as of the whole community. And to the extent possible, it provides the school district with recommendations that reflect the support of registered voters and is supported with a community survey. That's important as well, because not only is the CAC a large group that's very representative, but we, in December, for example, if you choose to convene, we would survey the community, and that gives you just that many more, thousands of data points, however many people choose to respond, right? We hope that a lot of people respond to the survey. In the parameters, it's important to note that the committee is aided by district staff and district consultants that serve as information providers for the committee. So it's, if you've been involved in it before, quite a bit of back and forth between what the district knows to be the challenges that we're facing and the community helping to shape those recommendations based on things like the facilities assessment and what we're hearing from our campus principals and our district directors and executive directors about what we know. So, but ultimately, they're not left alone to go discover what might be out there. The district is walking alongside the CAC the whole time and facilitating that conversation. Quite frankly, we know quite a few things we'd like them to be taking a look at regarding growth and some facilities needs. Another parameter is that the CAC recognizes that its role is to provide a recommendation to this board. And the board then determines the structure and the potential calling of the bond. It's not the CAC's job to call the bond. Skipping that one because it's in your handout. So a timeline for the way this works is that it's from September to January, should you choose to convene. The CAC meets in roughly 5 to 6 meetings, depending on how many we can get in there, more if necessary, and reviews all this information. We tour different facilities, etc. And then in January, they come together there's usually a leadership team from that team that is elected within the CAC, and then that team makes a presentation to you all in January. You then take that information and consider it. If between January and February meeting, you consider calling a bond election, then I believe February 16th would be your deadline for calling that, assuming a May election. Okay. So timeline and responsibilities. As far as the community's participation in the CAC, there's an application process. Any citizen willing to participate can fill out the form. It would be online and reviewed for, they got to be a resident. There's things you want to make sure that line up. And then the CAC invitations are also extended to identified community members, such as prior CAC members who've served before and know the process well. So sort of a list of folks that we would hope would want to serve with us again. An example from the Bond 2021 e-news that went out to the whole community, just so you kind of know how this information gets sent out, stated the goal of the CAC to the larger Georgetown community, inviting them to visit this link, and there's not a link there now, and that link goes to the existing information. If you go there now, there's not a place to sign up, but there would be a place to sign up with a deadline for getting involved. Okay, so looking ahead, we've had a workshop in July. We had a board meeting in July. We're sitting in this workshop today, considering your next steps and what you want to talk about heading into the August 21st board meeting with a potential action to authorize Dr. Padaville to form a citizens advisory committee who will then come back in January and advise you to decide whether you want to call it on.
Landon, may I ask a question?
Yes.
And please keep in mind I'm asking out of ignorance. This is day one. So, sometimes communities have a hard time forming a CAC and having it represent the geographic and demographic diversity of the community. How do we help make that happen so that every pocket of the community is represented?
I will, from the cuff, I'll say that I believe that's all baked into that application process, so that you don't have an over-representation of applicants from one area or another. And so, we've had, I think, 85-ish participants in the last CAC, and I believe those really, really representative of the whole of the community. So, could look very specifically at which questions we ask that would help us to make sure. I don't have that information in front of me, but I believe that process sets us up for success in that.
Yeah, thank you.
We also get principals to help with names, where every principal submits a couple
That's right.
of parents, and so that'll help assure just geographically that every campus has at least has the opportunity to be invited.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
But
Yes, sir.
Landon, forgive me if I missed this number. Is there typically a number associated with the size of the CAC?
75, 80 has been the
80
experience.
people.
Yeah, has been the experience, and that's physically showing up to meetings, about 80 people.
Okay.
It's a big group.
That's a big group.
And I know, Ms. Malden, you were involved in it.
Yeah, they did a really great job of taking that big group and breaking us down into smaller groups so that you could have engagement and talking. So they made it work the last time that I was on it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's facilitated in such a way that 80 doesn't feel like 80 people trying to talk at once, right? It carries the message home.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Switching gears and talking about campus and district improvement planning process. And so, there we go. All right, so just a quick look at a familiar timeline for you guys. Hopefully you recognize this slide. We've been looking at it for about 6 months. But just showing you where we started back in March when you guys adopted the new strategic direction. And then the work that we've been engaging in and where we're at today with the workshop, where we're ready to share the process and the plans. The plans are in your inbox now, in case you haven't looked at it in a little while. You've got, you might want to clear out some inbox space because there's 20 some odd attachments in there. But we're going to walk through a little bit of the process, some adjustments and new approaches to the process since we're using the strategic direction this year, and that's certainly new. But a couple of just highlight points as a few reminders. So each year the board adopts the goals and performance objectives. And I recognize I may be using some vocabulary that's new, so just bear with me, we'll do some crosswalking and so forth. But the goals and objectives are approved each year. And the reason that the strategies are not technically approved is because that allows those strategies to be fluid. And so as campuses and as the district is moving throughout the planning process, and we're doing those quarterly reviews, we can make adjustments to the strategies without need for approval and change and so forth. As I mentioned, these plans are aligned to the 2023 GISD strategic direction priority areas and objectives. And you've got a copy of those. That should be the second handout as you moved over from Landon Stock. And that's got the list of the 4 priority areas and then the corresponding objectives or priority objectives underneath. And then finally, these plans are also developed in accordance with our District of Innovation plan that allows us to have more flexibility and align to local initiatives. All right, so just pointing that out on the screen there, the strategic direction priority objectives. And as a reminder, there are more objectives in the strategic direction as a whole. These are what were identified as priority for this year. And so that's what you'll see reflected in the plans are these objectives. All right. A little bit about the process itself, and this isn't super different necessarily, but we go through a comprehensive needs assessment where that is, the staff takes a look at all available data. So whether that is student learning, that's student behavior information, discipline, attendance, demographic, kind of all the things related to who we are, and what we do as a school district to identify trends and needs. That then we build strategies to address particular needs. And that's where the district leaders collaborate, build strategies, and this is a collaborative process both at the campus level, so campus staff working with their staff, campus staff working with district staff, and district staff working with additional different district staff. So a lot of sharing of information. I'll show you a doc in just a moment that kind of helps us see at a balcony view who's doing what type of work in the organization. And then finally, we take them to our site-based teams, or district performance committee is the district site-based team, where we'll get feedback, and then our campuses are taking it to their site-based teams as well. All right, so new approaches. This is largely reflective due to our new strategic direction, as well as our work in community-based accountability. So kind of the biggest thing is here we are in August talking about drafts of improvement plans. Previous years, this is something that wasn't coming up until October at times or even later. So we're much earlier, and so I think this is work that's been going on since March. There's definitely a little bit of a strain on the system with that earliness, because staff came back today and kids come back next week, and on top of all of those things, right? So, but I think it's a much better process for us this year. Mentioned it's aligned to the new strategic direction. We will have a public report of progress 2 times this year. That's new, and so we want to be super transparent with our progress towards these objectives, and we'll share that out publicly twice during the school year. Each quarter, the updates will be posted publicly, but we won't have a report. We'll have a report 2 times a year. We're also using the change engine. If you remember earlier in the spring, Danielle Holloway, principal at Wagner, came and kind of shared some work that we piloted through our community-based accountability. It was a change engine. There's a lot of new terminology and so forth. But long story short, we're utilizing that change management process in the new planning process. And we're going to look at what that means. But just a couple of orienting pieces. Our campuses chose 1 priority objective from goal 1, or strategic priority area 1, to apply this change engine to. So that means that it's major change, and they're going to use this change engine that you've got in your packet as well. And we'll look at here. Departments chose any 1 priority objective on the list. Didn't have to be directly from goal 1, but any of the list. And then finally, another new for this year is we have more departmental input into the district improvement plan than ever before. A little bit more to manage and get into an articulated plan, but I think we feel it is definitely an improved process and product to have a wider net of influence into it. I will say I think that's reflective of the strategic direction, more fully encompassing the work of our organization as a whole.
Wes, could I ask a question?
Yes, please. Slow me down.
Would you go back a slide?
Yep.
I'm thrilled to see the public report of progress 2 times per year. Can you elaborate a little bit about what that's going to look like? Is it going to be based upon a district report, or is it going to be that each campus is going to have a report that they're going to do 2 times a year based upon where they are as the plan?
Yeah. Good
Talk
question.
about that a little bit more.
So this is for the district report. And so we would take the district improvement plan and be able to show progress on each objective and each strategy that's in that plan. And we'll do that, I would imagine, in a setting similar to this. But slides and indicators of progress with handouts show. We'll have some, we should have some quantifiable metrics at that point mid-year. We'll definitely have some kind of qualitative aspects, kind of the narrative of talking about the progress for each strategy.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Now, each campus plan will be updated quarterly and then reposted. So once we get them all approved, we'll post them publicly on the webpage, and then each quarterly update, then we'll post the kind of refreshed version then.
Could I ask, what exactly is department? Is that like history, math,
Oh, good
science?
question.
or-
So in the district, it's more of a district level department. So teaching and learning, athletics, fine arts, assessment,
all right,
feedback.
all right.
Yep, good question. Good question. And traditionally, our DIP has been mostly influenced through kind of the teaching and learning lens. And so this year, that much broader perspective contributing. Awkward pause for another question. Alrighty, so just now to do a little bit of crosswalking. Hopefully you recognize this. This is the strategic direction as approved, or just an example of it. I want to show you where pieces of the strategic direction land and translate into the DIP, and so into the documents that you have in your inbox. So right up here, so goals, we move from the terminology on the left to the terminology on the right. And so the strategic priority area is translated into goal language. And so that's our goal 1, student learning, growth, and progress. The picture of success, which is right up here with the strategic priority area, is captured there underneath the goal. 23, 24 priority objective. So there's performance objective number 3. It's translated into as a PO, as we call them. And then the multiple evidences banked below that in the evaluation data sources. And so this is kind of the main translation. Now in our change engines, what we're translating priority work is falling into strategies. And so the strategies are, okay, so what are you doing, right? What are you doing to make progress towards that objective. That's what you'll find in the strategies. So just a little bit of orienting as you look into the plan. All right, as a reminder, this is the portion that is approved by the Board of Trustees, and that's the goal, capture with a picture of success, and then each of those performance objectives as well. All right, so as you are looking at the plans, there's a few more things that you'll see that are new. The first is a change engine chart, and I know that sounds really bizarre, but I can't think of a better name to call it. And that is this folded document, super colorful, but really what that is, and you've got a little bit bigger copy. I was trying to explain.
Yeah, how big is the bigger copy?
It should be in your
Double.
Is that or a magnifying glass?
Well, it's not,
Oh, you've got a copy right
In
there.
your paper clips.
Ah,
There you go.
fancy.
It's there.
Yep, all right, everyone got one of those.
You're still gonna want it, Stephanie was doing this to it.
But what this is you'll see across the top each of the priority objectives categorized by the strategic priority areas, and then down the left side you'll see all the campuses and their description of change that they're making for each objective. And so the red is major change. Let's jump ahead just so we're all looking at the same thing. So red is major change, yellow is minor change, and green is maintain. And we kind of have qualifiers for what does it mean to be major change. And for us, that's change that will likely take more than a year to fully implement the change. And it may take resources outside of the campus. So that's likely going to be resources either from district departments, maybe even external third-party resources. And so that's what we'll call major change. As a reminder, campuses were required to choose one of the first 4 to do major change on and use the change engine on. And we'll talk about the change engine in just a moment. The minor change is change that we feel like is generally done within the span of 1 school year and generally utilizing campus level resources. And so there will certainly be collaboration between the campus and the district, but largely it's resources within the campus to make those changes. And then finally, maintain is sometimes a misnomer that we have to remind ourselves to. It's not really maintain status quo, it's maintaining the efforts that you're getting the results, right? So there are results associated with these decisions. And so the goal is we're going to keep pedaling that bike to maintain the progress that we're making. We're not going to make changes, but we are going to keep working. And so maintaining costs, cost resources too. Any questions on that stuff?
So you required each campus to choose one from the first 4. Were they required to choose any from the others?
No, not to run the change engine on. That's right. And we'll talk about that just next.
Okay.
Yep.
Just because, I mean, it
So you
catches
see
your
that
eye when
reflected.
you see so many
That's right.
there.
That's right.
But they were in fact directed that one of those 4.
One of those 4 run the change engine on one of those 4. That's right.
And then it was campuses that chose. And were they limited in any way? I noticed that most campuses have 1, maybe 2, but that Eastview chose 5 major
Yeah.
change areas.
Yeah. So and we've guidance. What I will say is this is also learning towards our work, right? And so there's not necessarily a perfect playbook for the right or best way to do this. But what we do know is we do have to be careful about how much we bite off to say is major change, right? And so we feel like this is right now a snapshot. And so could it change? It may. A campus could get in a couple of months or weeks and realize, okay, we're going to have to do a little bit more than maintain right here. Or based on the amount of major change this requires, we may have to dial back the amount of attention that we can put on one. And so, 5 major changes feels like a lot, but at the same time, this is a snapshot of kind of August 2023. We may see these kind of dial back or dial up a little bit.
Wes,
Yes,
if
sir.
I may ask a
You bet.
clarifying question, just to expand on what Ms. McFarland brought up, for the major change, let's take ECU as an example. Was there data that prompted major change being assigned there, or was there principal autonomy in deciding that was major change, or both?
Yeah, so it's for sure principal autonomy in choosing which one to do major change. But there was also data that they were using to understand the needs. You know, these were not chosen arbitrarily, for sure. There's kind of empirical evidence used. There's certainly anecdotal evidence of just having lived the year prior or years prior to understand the needs.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so I've talked a lot about this change engine thing, and so I want to talk about where you'll see that represented and what it is. So back into the plan, this is kind of representative of a goal and a performance objective in the plan, so what you have in your email. And you'll see on certain objectives that the campus says, for evaluation data sources, see attached addendum, goal 1, PO 1. And what that's talking about, that kind of correlates back to one of these red boxes for each of the campuses. And so you've got an example of that. That is the one with the light green strip across the top. And this is just a snapshot example. We're not going to go through all the cells on here, I promise. But just orienting.
I think we could anyways. I mean,
Just kind of orienting top to bottom, left to right. At the top, you'll see the priority area. Below that is the specific objective that they're working on. And then this sheet represents a process that's a little bit different than our typical strategic planning or improvement planning, and that is really start thinking about what do we want to accomplish and what do we need to be in order to accomplish it. Oftentimes we skip by that, we go straight to what do we want to measure, or what can we measure, and what do we want to do, right? And so we don't always give as much intention into what are we actually trying to accomplish, and then eventually, how will we know we're making progress? Now, based on that evidence, what are we going to do? So left to right on the side over here, you'll see answers to questions of what will you see if instruction, assessment, and intervention are becoming aligned at this particular campus. As you move to the right, you'll see, okay, based on that evidence, what's our current state? That's kind of that middle column. And then the far right is, now based on our current state, what do we need to do about it? And so you'll see these attached in each of the campus plans. And they're, again, aligned to the heat chart up here with the red ones, just the red ones. We do have some campuses that chose to do more than one, that chose to do the addendums on 1, 2, or sometimes even 3 objectives. And I will say, I think starting this work, this was heavy lifting, wrapping our heads around a different way of thinking in strategic improvement planning. As we started working on it, we began to find the value in being really intentional and from the onset of saying, okay, here's our big goal, here's where we want to be, this is what do we want to accomplish, and then really living in the area of evidence, like how will we know we're making progress? If we looked inside our school buildings, how will we know we're making progress? What would be happening or what would be occurring? What would we be hearing? And then capture that, identify where we're at, and then start making plans, and that's where the improvement plans come from there. So everything on the right, from the departmental lens, has been translated into the DIP, whereas campuses are attaching this, and so you'll see addendum attached. Questions on that stuff? All right.
We may have more questions.
I
when we see
suspect.
it.
Yeah.
I suspect.
Plan, yeah.
Yep. And as always, if you've got questions or comments, feel free to holler back at me or any others. So a few final notes. I do just want to mention some learning that we had last month that was really, really impactful. We had a group from Solution Tree come in and work with all of DLT, campus leaders, campus staff there as well, to work on building a consistent multi-tiered system of support. You've probably heard us use an MTSS or multi-tiered system of support, and that concept is the way we create a systematic approach to meeting specific needs, whether academic or behavioral, social emotional, or in our counseling services as well. So this work with Solution Tree last month dovetailed really nicely with the same work we're doing in MTSS and different aspects of our organization. And what I will say is the intention here was about a consistent approach. So the way in which we do MTSS at one particular campus is going to look, feel, and smell like the same way at the next campus. Though some of the interventions are going to be nuanced to the needs, the systems will be the same. All right, last slide, guys, I promise. Just next steps. Like I mentioned, campuses are meeting with their site-based teams to gather input. The district plan will go before the DPC for feedback. Campus and district leaders are already moving. It is August, which is much earlier than it ever has been with regards to plans, but staff is back today, and these plans are essentially, staff are working, right? Nobody's necessarily waiting to get started. So they'll continue that work and begin new work as well. We do anticipate we'll bring the plans for actual consideration at the August board meeting in a couple of weeks. So hopefully you'll have some time between now and then to review, ask questions. I know our campus and district staff, we may be doing some refining and tweaking, but the essence will be what you've got in your inbox. And then, just last thing, if you've got questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to reach out. Happy to sit down and visit and or share any insight or clarify. Because we've definitely got some new approaches this year that have demanded quite clarity from ourselves. Yes, ma'am.
Dennis, who would you like for us, or who would you like for us to reach out to if we have a question?
You can reach out to me, ma'am, and then I'll work with Wes.
And then you
to
work with them.
follow up.
Okay, okay, we have a question. Okay, good.
There you go.
Okay, very good.
Sure. Any other questions? If you've got them, send them to Dr. Patton.
Careful what you ask for.
He's only got one day to use that first day on the job.
That's right. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
All right.
So we have homework.
Yeah, we have a lot of homework.
All right. So I think just taking a quick peek at the board meeting coming up in a couple weeks. As Lanny mentioned, we've got consideration and action coming for a citizens advisory committee, and then approval of goals and performance objectives on the district and campus improvement plans. So just a quick reminder, this is generally something we bring up through improvement planning. We've got accountability ratings coming late September, and so we may be coming back to the table and talk about improvement planning based on accountability ratings, but that feels like we're a lifetime away from that. But
So that being said, you've probably had a sneak peek as to how our kids did. We did so well with our end of course.
Mm-hmm.
What is your gut feelings for the data you've seen for elementary and middle?
I would say promising. I mean, we're definitely seeing some progress in different areas. Super raw, as you know, which we'll have that to you this week, hopefully. But definitely seeing some areas of growth, some areas that might be right at consistent with last year's. In very few areas, I think that might have dropped a few points, but overall, pretty positive.
Good.
Yep. All right, now I'm done.
Yeah, it was kind of a light agenda this time around. We didn't really, not very often, we hire a new superintendent.
I say minus the one really big thing.
There was that one
We
thing.
left a lot of fluff room in there, because normally these workshops are about 2 hours. But some.
I can keep going if we need to.
That's quite all right. I appreciate the offer.
Well, Mr. Pearl, I just want to say I appreciate the work that Landon and Wes have put into their presentations, and I know just the level of detail they've provided already. This will give you a lot of opportunities to ask questions, and then, of course, Wes or Landon can reach back out to you and answer any questions trustees have.
And I honestly don't feel bad being done early, because I feel like y'all have gotten your pound of sweat out, or pound of flesh out of us this summer.
Yeah, that's true.
It's fair.
That's
Fair.
true.
All been good.
All been good.
Yes.
All well worth it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have one thing. If no one else wants to be the TASB delegate, I think I sent that email out and everyone said, go for it.
Go for it.
So
Go
all
for
I
it.
need is for Elizabeth's signature. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you for wanting to do that.
I make a motion that you go for it.
I do have one more thing before we break. I'd just like to say and recognize this weekend, there was an event hosted in coordination with district leadership and the Georgetown Cultural Citizens Memorial Association, the backpack school supply giveaway. And I just want to commend everybody who took part in that and congratulate y'all on such a successful event. It was really well received, it was really well attended. This is my first year on the board, so I learned that we had more than double the backpacks that we had last year and probably quadruple the volunteers. District leadership at every level were there, parents, teachers. There were multiple board members there, and I know firsthand it really meant a lot not only to the people who organized it, but to the faces in the cars as people drove by, to the kiddos in the hall who were playing games and kicking balls, and just really felt supported and encouraged to start a new school year with fresh backpack and new school supplies, and like the support of a bunch of caring, loving people from the community around them. It really meant a lot, and to anybody who was there, you could feel the energy around it. And I think that obviously we're all here to support the children in multiple ways, but that was one that was, it was really well received, and I want to thank everybody for that. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Patterson, for coming.
Absolutely. Dr. Padville showed up. I'm not sure if you pet the kangaroo.
I didn't.
There was actually a kangaroo there, yeah. I didn't see you. Once I found out there was a kangaroo, I was gone.
I interacted with the kangaroo.
It's much
I
softer
went to
than
risk
I
it
did.
before I was approved for our contract.
Yeah.
Which we're grateful for.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
It's
Yeah.
great, so thank
Thanks
you.
to Linda for your work on that.
Yeah, thank you. That was
you did a
phenomenal.
Great job.
Yeah, it really.
And so since we are technically in a special meeting, I have to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
Okay, motion by trustee Malden,